It is now. All yours.
So, essentially, over a couple of basics. Meeting. One is the outstanding debt balance, and everybody got the email that Danielle sent on Tuesday, the 26th, at 3:30. Essentially, we have about $93 million in debt outstanding. She provided us with, I asked her to provide us with the amortization schedules of all the debt. And if you look at, our debt payments are essentially $7 million a year for the year 2033. And debt and interest payments combined will cost the school district about $145 million between now and then. So I just want everybody to be aware of that, and hopefully it's something that carries through from one finance committee to the next, so that future boards are aware of the burden that that places on the school district in terms of its finances going forward. I don't think there's anything else to say about that. I'll share with the rest of the board the organization schedule so everybody has them. Unless you have any questions, I don't think there's anything else to say about that. No. Okay. The other one was the swap valuations. She sent that around as well. Currently, the value of the swap is a negative $2.1 million. It was as low as $1.9 million in February, and then obviously last July was the last time we had a shot at possibly swapping out of this thing when it was $1.4 million. So I want to make sure that she's reviewing these things on a monthly basis, and if we get close again, we have an opportunity to step out of the swap if that's what the board wants to do. But that was the other one that was on here.
When did she send us out?
It came in the same email as the amortization schedule. There were 3 attachments there.
Tuesday, right?
Yeah. Okay. Tuesday at 3:30. What else did I ask her? You don't see that? It says swap valuations. It's an Excel file.
No.
Did you get that email from her? The 26th?
According to this, yes, they did.
Yeah, I should have got
What, it was Tuesday?
Yeah, according to this, you both got it.
Tuesday the 26th at 3:32 p.m.
Yeah.
With Kevin, Dr. Otto, Monica,
Correct.
Frank, Julie Berkey, and myself.
All right, I don't see it.
You want to forward?
Nevertheless,
Here it is.
Can you forward to me, Kevin?
Yep.
Thanks.
Me too, if you would mind.
No problem. I got to do it in this
The other one she has on here is,
There's a forward thing up at the top.
Yeah, but I got to figure out their address.
I asked her for a couple of pieces of information. So one was the outstanding debt balance. The other one was the weekly swap valuations since the inception of the swap. Third one was the estimate of fund balance for the close of the year. And she has that at $4,249,883. So that's a change from the last budget workshop that we had, where we thought it was going to be $3.9 million.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually looking at a $250,000 surplus this year, as opposed to using the $647,000 of fund balance that we thought we were going to use. We're actually going the other way and having a surplus of, actually it's $200,588. So overall, we were under budget by about $840,000 for this year.
I'm sorry, what was that? I'm sorry.
If you pull up her email, you should see what she has in here. Fund balance for the end of the year is projected to be $4,240,000.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got that one. Yep, I got that one. Thank you.
So not only do we not use the $640,000 fund balance that we had projected to use, but we also are throwing a surplus beyond that, $200,588 for a total of $841,000 under budget.
But that, again, that's not final, correct?
It's not final, but I asked her, is there any outstanding, I mean, she does put a caveat in here. She says that she hasn't received all the invoices for June and July, or for June. Those invoices, some of those invoices coming in July and August, but I did ask her, are you expecting anything extraordinary that you had not anticipated as part of the budget? She said no. So I'm assuming then that the costs that are coming in are ones that we are expecting to come in.
Sometimes anything that might be large might be special ed placements, sometimes the way those places bill, they're very delayed in doing the billing, so, but I don't think they're,
We should know what those placements are.
yeah, we know what they are, but, we
It
don't
won't rise to
actually,
that magnitude, though.
pardon?
It wouldn't rise
No,
to that
no,
magnitude.
no, it's not gonna.
We did get I asked her what the status of the capital escrow funds were with Union Township. Obviously, on Monday night's meeting, we did receive a notification from Union Township that those funds were approved for release by the supervisors. So we should have roughly about $300,000 returned to our capital reserve accounts, which we are obviously using for the replacement of the chillers. But Mr. Scott's here, so obviously that money is back in the coffers. The second email I asked her about was to provide us with an analysis of the Senate and House appropriation bills. They're in Harrisburg. This obviously was announced after our meeting on Monday night, but it looks like more money will be coming to Damon Boone than we anticipated for this year and what we have programmed into our budget. I'm trying to think, she also sent a revised one for the House. My understanding is we could expect anywhere between $150,000 and $305,000 in additional funds for this year, for this coming year, as opposed to what we had actually budgeted for. Dr. Otta, do you know anything more about that?
I mean, we reviewed that information today, but as far as,
And what did you guys?
I mean, what she had on the paper, I think was just, we have to wait to see what the state finally does. I think they said maybe by Saturday they would have their budget passed, and then I think in the school code bill that they're passing as well, they're going to allow districts to reopen their budget and reflect that money back in. So they don't usually do that, but they're going to do that this time. So
essentially-
nothing definitive in terms of whether we got that money yet, because there's no passage of it, but it's a proposal.
Right.
So I saw the spreadsheets that you have. She and I discussed those today as well.
Yeah. So essentially, I think when we had this discussion about fund balance and how much fund balance we're going to use in terms of our budget, we were projected to use just under $1.4 million. Clearly, we're not going to be using that much fund balance going forward this year in the 12-13. Depending on the amount of money the state provides us, it could be...
Depending on the amount of money the state provides, depending on if and when we actually go ahead and freeze the budget as we have, or done a limited freeze, I guess is always the best way to say it, because that's been, I think, instrumental in having these surpluses come through.
No, absolutely, it's instrumental. I think that's a good idea. I mean, it would seem to be a no-brainer to implement a freeze right off the start, so that we don't have an issue going forward in terms of unnecessary spending.
Well, I think it's obviously helped the balance sheet, spreadsheet, or the balance ledger, whatever you want to call it. And as you know, we have come to you for spending of different things. Microsoft rollover is one of them, but those things have actually, because of the freeze, the money's been there to be able to do that. So I think we've been very judicious in looking at the kind of things that we have released monies to spend.
Well, which would mean we, going forward, we could be looking at, still carrying a healthy fund balance for next year. Somewhere around
Well,
the neighborhood of-
even if you were to assume the use of all of it, you'd still be somewhere, what Danielle and I talked about today, close to 3 still,
Yeah,
which is
2.9 million.
fairly healthy
Or
still,
more.
right? So if our track record is, if we're on a trend as we have been recent years, we could be okay. My only concern would be factoring in that the fees money, that $800,000, when we actually get to looking at the budget for next year, but we'll have to see how that plays out.
And I asked her also, and I think at the end of the day, when we actually finalize these numbers from the state, is I asked her to provide everybody with a copy of the budget worksheet that we were working with, just kind of as a wrap-up, so we all understand at the end of the day where we actually end up, as opposed to what we thought we were ending up at.
This one?
Yeah, I mean, because this one, it still doesn't reflect what, she still has on here, 4 million, it's the one from the end of June. It doesn't reflect what the state may provide us. It doesn't reflect her final estimates for fund balance. Here she still has $4 million in here, not 4.2. So I think that's a big difference. And I think at the end of the day, the board needs to get a recap of exactly what it is we're spending this year, what we're projected to spend on fund balance. I don't think it would be such a bad idea if we open the budget one more time after we know what the state's doing and just finalize exactly how much money we're spending out of fund balance to balance the budget.
Absolutely. Makes sense to me.
Anybody have any objections to that?
I've never done that before, so I don't know exactly what's required.
No one
in it.
could. You weren't
We
allowed
weren't
to.
allowed
Oh,
to
okay.
before. Yeah,
That would answer that
this is
question.
the first time that we could do that.
I would assume they're going to promulgate some guidelines on exactly how to do that.
Okay, the last thing that I want to do is, now that we've sort of gone through that preliminarily, I want to talk about this issue of moving forward with a budget, a monthly budget that reflects actual costs. Now, I had sent to the entire board a spreadsheet that I had done, which basically took the monthly statements of the fund balance for the last 4 years that we get at every meeting, before every voting meeting, and went and just took a look at the 11 categories that the budget's broken down to on a monthly basis, and analyzed how much we were spending each month out of the budget for that year, and then calculated what percentage of the budget those expenditures were each month. And remarkably, there's a lot of consistency about how much we spend on a monthly basis out of our budget as a percentage of the budget. And then using that as a model, excuse me, to project what we should be spending out of our budget in a current year. And that's the only way I know how to do this, unless administratively the business office can sit down and take a look at what they're actually going to, what we anticipate our actual cost to be on a monthly basis with our budget. Because right now, all we do is take a look at how much we've spent out of our budget in a given year. So if we're in February, you can ask Danielle, well, where are we with our budget? She'll say, well, we spent 43% of our budget. That doesn't tell you whether you've overspent or underspent, or you're tracking high or you're tracking low. It just tells you how much you've spent. And so the issue we really need to know is, well, if we spent 43%, what did you project to spend by this time in a given year? Did you project to spend 43? Did you project to spend 40 or 47? And so I think that's the issue we need to get to. I don't know how else to do this other than to take the data historically and put that into a model that's going to show us what we actually are spending on a monthly basis, and then say, okay, well, look, we're assembling the data now for 12-13. Or we've already assembled the data for 12-13, so somebody needs to break down 12-13 and say, okay, well, this is how much we expect to spend in salaries on a monthly basis. This is how much we expect to spend on benefits on a monthly basis. This is where our debt payments are. This is what our transportation costs are going to be. This is how much we're going to spend in facilities. I mean, it shouldn't be that difficult to break it down into a monthly basis, because most of these things are contractual. Most of these things are set up for payment schedules anyways. I think the difficulty will be in when you get into these smaller things like special education and building expenses and things of that nature, where the building principals, we need to sit down and look at their budgets and say, well, this is typically when we make these purchases,
right,
whether it's for paper or books or whatever it is that they're doing.
I'm not surprised to hear you say that when you look at that historically, that it's consistent, because most bills for different things come due at the same time every year. It's kind of like your home budget. Your electric bill comes on the 15th. Your gas bill comes on the 20th.
I probably pull that data, except for salaries and debt service. I mean, as far as all the checks go, I can pull that data. It's a cash flow statement we're basically looking for, right? We just want to get a cash flow analysis, monthly cash flow.
That's
So,
exactly what I want to see.
yeah, we don't have. I don't have the. I don't have the data that we don't write checks for, or the debt service and things like that. But all the others, we can pretty much look at those on a monthly basis. based on the check runs. I think that the challenge is the tools, you know. I think if you use the current software tools that Danielle uses, it's very difficult for her to pull some of this data. I think that's where we run into a challenge, and where it takes her so long to get something that we kind of think is pretty straightforward, simple
Well,
piece of data to get. And
to
so-
me, it's a function of getting it, and then once we have the process in place, I think it becomes repetitive. It becomes very easy to do. So I agree with you that it's just a question of getting the systemic question answered, how to start getting it done.
Well, and I don't know to what degree, as the superintendent, you can, you know, put this on a priority in terms of, you know, that we need to, because before we can assemble, I think, a 5-year budget, which I think we all agree is necessary to have a multi-year budget going forward. I think we need to establish our annual budget and break it down into the seasonality that's typically reflected there. Because until we can get control on our annual budget and be able to project with relatively certainty where are we on a month-to-month basis and how we're going to end, it's impossible then to take that and look forward 2, 3, 4 years and have any sort of accuracy in terms of, you know, where we expect our expenses to be. And therefore, how much revenue do we have to have? And how much fund balance can you spend? Or how much you're going to have to raise taxes? Or, you know, and the combination thereof in order to get a balanced budget year in, year out for the next 4 or 5 years. And quite frankly, I think if we can get to that point and you can telegraph to the public, look, this is where we're going to be in year 4 or year 5 with our budget. If everything remains constant, this is where we're going to be. So we got to get from here to here. And there's only one way to do that. Either the entire asset base needs to increase in the entire school district in terms of real estate values, or B, we got to raise taxes, or C, you got to spend fund balance, or, you know, we got to generate revenue from other sources, or whatever it's going to be.
Or cut program.
Or cut program to get to where you have to be in order to balance the budget 1 year after the next, after the next, after the next. And I think then, at least if you're telegraphing to the public what your plan is to get there, as a board, we can sit there and say, okay, well, it's going to be this sort of combination of these levers to get to that, to get to the end zone. And you can telegraph that to the public. At least they can prepare. You know, they can expect, hey, look, over the next 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, we're going to see taxes go up by X percent, and the school district's going to spend X percent of fund balance or whatever it's going to be. And, you know, whether we do it in small increments, or you skip a year and then raise it, skip a year and raise it, and there's larger jumps, at least folks get the sense of what's happening and they can prepare for it. And that's ultimately where I'd like to go, and that's ultimately what I'd like to get done in the next 12 months, or if not sooner. And I don't know what we need to do to help the business office get there.
Well, there were a couple of years ago, we, now when you're talking about the 5-year model, I don't think, it doesn't sound to me like the monthly thing is going to be that
I would hope it wouldn't be that difficult.
That doesn't sound as difficult as the 5-year kind of thing.
Yeah, but for the monthly one, why don't you just go back to the last 2 months of August, take all the checks and put them in 10 categories. Do it for September, do it for October. That's how you just do it. You can just break whatever. You write 250 checks a month, divide them into 10 categories that we want to see, throw them in there for the last 2 months of 2 August, 2 September. That at least gives you a starting point for this year.
I can give you that data now.
Yeah, I mean, that's
but
easy.
what I don't have
Is
is some of the bigger payment checks, because I don't get those through the check run.
Well,
I
because
don't have
there's-
the
why?
debt service checks. I don't get the
Because they're electronically transferred.
because they're not done the same way through that check run. They're done
Okay, but
electronic.
there is
electronic.
there is
There's no check.
Okay, then how about this? You have someone has access to the bank, the checkbook.
Yeah, we can.
I mean, you guys
we
have
can
the
get it.
spreadsheet that I sent to you. It's the general fund balance.
Yeah.
Which spreadsheet, if you open that up, those are the fund balances, those are the monthly expenses broken down into 9 categories over the last 4 years.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I don't. Again, that should be easy to do. And as for the ones, they're probably transferred electronically, Frank.
Yeah, they are.
That's why they're not on the check run, but they still have to be accounted somewhere in the checkbook. You know, so those should be able to pull out.
Yeah, we'll just have to see if we could get Danielle or Julie to.
Better yet,
to
they
send
should
me
be
that.
able to give you a list of every withdrawal out of the primary account on a monthly basis,
Yeah.
whether it be a check or ACH.
Yeah.
All you do is break them down to your 9 categories, and boom, you're done.
Well, or different,
Whatever, I don't
these
care,
are just
whatever.
the ones that come
Yeah,
on the
I
financial
don't care
statements
what-
that we receive
yeah,
on a
okay.
monthly basis.
Fine,
the
I don't
public
care,
is
you
to
could do
see.
10, you could do 12, I don't
But,
care how
I
many.
mean, I think starting with a 9 is a start.
Well,
And
sure.
then if you take it from the 9, you go to the category 1,
Correct.
or
But
you go
it's-
to supplies, and then you can take supplies and say, okay, now we're going to break it down by building.
Correct.
And then you can because the way she reports these things, when I ask for this stuff, we get 1,800 lines of code for the budget. And it's, you get, a 17-digit number, which tells you not only what category it's in, what
Tells you the building.
what building, what
But first do
teacher,
the first
whatever.
9 major categories, that should be a no-brainer. If you have 300 checks, you just put them where they belong in those 9 categories, or ACH transfers and you're done. It shouldn't be that hard to do.
And
At least
then-
I don't see,
I
there
think
should be
you-
a check run somewhere.
Well, the other thing then is once you get this established, and this is what the other thing was, I want her to smooth this out. So this shows you actual where these things land. And sometimes certain checks land in one month when they should have landed
Sure.
in another. And so at the end of the day, someone has to go back and reconcile that so that you're not sitting there saying, well, look, this one payment which should have landed in December actually landed in January. So you see a difference from one year to the next in your January payments versus your December payments. So why is there that large variance there? And so you want to kind of group all these things as to when they should happen. So you have, you have your actual accounting, and then you have your managerial accounting, which is where things should really land. And then what you're doing is you can say, okay, that's what we're going to budget for.
It shouldn't be that hard to do.
No, it shouldn't be, but for whatever reason, we can't seem to get it done.
Let me pull that data. I'll get with her and see if I can get what I'm missing.
You should only be missing a couple. I mean, there should only be a couple.
A couple of real big ones.
Yeah, they're big money, but there shouldn't be that many of
No,
them.
there shouldn't be many.
There shouldn't be that many. I'm sure we don't.
And I know of them, I just don't have them in the
That's what I'm
file.
saying, but it can't be, we're not doing an ACH for $50.
Right.
You're doing couple $100,000, which should be, again, and those are the big ticket items, but there are not many of them.
Right.
Can't be.
So we'll do 2011, 2012.
Well, if you want to, I don't know if you want to go back 2 years, but you should at least, 1 year, the last year should be no problem by now. In fact, you should be able to do it by tomorrow. I mean, not tomorrow, but after tomorrow, after Saturday, 2 weeks later, she should be able to do the whole year. It shouldn't take that long to go through all that stuff.
Dr. O, why is June like our most expensive month? Is that because, I see we pay a lot of salaries in June. Is that, we pay a lump sum for
Yeah.
the balance of the summer?
For some of the people that
Teachers
do.
take lump sum or spread it out over the summer.
I see. They have an option.
They
They have an option,
Is
so.
that contractual, or is that something we can decide?
I think it's contractual, and then when you go to, I'm sure it has to be.
It has to be. Yeah, but it is.
It's either contractual or something that, I can check. I don't know whether it's just been a procedure from everything I've ever known with.
It could just be something we've been doing, but
No, I think that's negotiated.
could you look into that?
I just can grab the contract. I don't have it here with me, but sure.
I think that would be helpful, because if it's not contractual, then if we can say, look, you're forced to take your lump sum payment in June, then we don't need as much working capital in July and August on hand. And because most of our working capital goes to pay these salaries and benefits in July and August when we don't have any revenue.
It might be contractual.
I think it is.
I'll
I'll just double check.
But the other thing the other thing is,
I think
and I
that-
agree, you could do that. The other thing is, be careful because you pay a processing fee. Sometimes you only come one paycheck instead of multiple paychecks. You know what I'm
So you
saying?
pay a processing fee for one paycheck?
Yeah, every time you run payroll, I'm sure we're paying a fee, some kind of fee to run a payroll.
If you're running less payroll, yeah.
Yeah, but then your suggestion is spread it out over the summer.
No, I'm saying don't spread it out.
Oh, I'm
He's saying get it off the
Oh, I'm
books.
sorry, I
Do
misunderstood.
a lump sum
you. Oh, I'm
payment in
sorry.
June, and
Okay.
then you don't have payments in July and August.
Yeah, the only reason why I think it's contractual is because you're gonna kill people with federal income tax. You know what I'm saying?
But they're good.
If you make one lump payment, you'll take out more federal income tax than if you would spread it over, payroll-wise.
Or you pay them more.
You know what I mean?
You increase their payment, you can do a 10-month payment schedule then as opposed to a 12-month.
Yeah, right now, they're spread out over 10, 12 months instead, 26 pays instead of
Whatever it could be.
20,
18 or something.
18, 19. So then their biweekly paycheck goes up, which means there's more federal withholding, and you're gonna do all that crap. I mean, not that, again, I'm not disagreeing with you, but right now, most people are paid over 26 pay periods. I don't have a copy of the contract with me. I'm thinking-
The other thing I saw in here was like our other purchase services is high in June. Is that also, that's like special education?
I don't know. That would be my guess. I would have to, examine that. But that's probably reconciliation of IU costs for maybe some of the services that the IU.
I was gonna say that.
My guess is it's special ed kids
They probably
or
bill us
special
at the end of
ed.
the
I
year.
shouldn't say kids programs.
They also probably bill us at the end of the year, some of those people. You know what I mean? They pay us at the end of the year. What am I looking up? Teacher's salary. Teachers.
I mean, I can get you an answer on that too.
And then in terms of, one of the things that comes up a lot is that we don't have the time in our offices to put this thing in place. And so, if that's the case, so be it. Then, I'd like to make a suggestion that we hire somebody to do this.
Well, 2 years ago, or it might even have been 3 when we had discussed this, there were 2 sources that we discussed, and we dug up that information again today, and it would, I think, would come at, based on how important this is to our processes, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about $2,500 to get somebody to do a 5-year model.
I mean, that's nothing.
Excuse me. All employees shall be paid on a biweekly basis. Procedure will file a 12-month pay period. 12-month monthly basis of pay distribution counted provided by the district business office. Any employee can receive additional monies due him or her at the end of the school year, provided a written request be submitted by May 15th of that year. So it's in the contract.
Okay.
So in other words, if the teacher doesn't want to spread it, they can take a lump of it.
I figured it was contractual. Usually unions
Just so you know that.
negotiate that kind of thing.
Yep, that's helpful. It's that idea off until the contract begins.
Well, no, I figured that's what it was. I figured, like he said, I figured it's.
But look, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't have the time to do these models, because every time I actually work on a model, I get it up and running, the data gets stale, the code, it's one thing after another, and, we can't seem to keep the model going, and I can't spend the time.
I would recommend that you let us go out for some RFPs and see what we can get. And if it comes in at the right price, do it. I mean, she said she felt like something like that, with a group like that, they're going to have to come in and do some original data scrubbing and do some things to get the information to be able to do that, but that's what they do, these firms and these people. She had mentioned there was a gentleman out with the last name of Hartman. He had a model. I think he worked through her state business association.
There's one guy that does this, which is,
and then there's a couple other firms.
I just
think
want to
that
be
do
careful.
this.
Whatever we develop is an accurate model, because there was one that we dug up. It was some guy out of Penn State or something.
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
the Hartman guy.
Right, and all he did was, he did what I've already done, which is he just takes percentages and says, okay, well, that's what you're going to spend next year, these percentages.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one way to get a loosey-goosey sort of back of the envelope feel of what our budget is.
Uh-huh.
But I think you really need to take a look at actual costs.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody needs to sit down and take, ownership of their domain in terms of their building budget or whatever it is, these facilities budgets, transportation budgets, and say, okay, well, I get it. We're going to spend a certain percentage of this budget every month as a benchmark, but really, what are we going to spend? Let me walk into this thing and take a look at it.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Does our auditors have anything like that? They know our data better than anybody.
I don't know that they do a lot of projective work.
Yeah, but they have all our data.
But they have,
When they audit it, they can then manipulate it, not manipulate, I'm sorry.
and we have all of our own data, too.
I understand that. Well, then, wouldn't they be able, I
I
would
just want to
think,
make sure we get somebody who knows how to do financial modeling and
I
not
would-
an accountant. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, I agree, but I'm thinking.
Well, why don't we give us time for the next finance committee meeting, start shaking the tree, see who's out there, bring a couple people in and let them talk to the committee, see what they can offer us. And then, because you guys have the good questions, I mean, Danielle can be here, she can ask the questions to see if it's going to generate for our money what we eventually want to get as the product. I mean, we've done that for other things, called people in, say, give us your best shot. What do you have for us? This is what we're looking for. I think we could model a nice RFP for them, and this is...
We definitely don't want to hire a consultant.
I'm not saying consultant, we want somebody to do a job for us.
Look, at the end of the day, we got to get it done, and if we don't have the manpower to do it internally, then we need to find somebody externally who's going to be able to do it for us. I mean, I'm happy to spend time on it, but you know, it becomes something that becomes an inordinate amount of time for me to do, and quite frankly, you know, I want to make sure in some way that the whole board is comfortable working on this thing. You know,
That makes sense. I think that makes perfect sense.
Basil's numbers or whatever, it shouldn't be, you know what I mean, whatever's
Absolutely.
created should be something that everybody has faith in.
Well, if it's the flavor of the committee, we'll get started on looking for, not a consultant, but some kind of service that can do this for us. One that everybody will trust and that everybody agrees upon.
Now, Danielle did send me a bunch of stuff, which basically took the contract and all of our contracts, teachers, administrative, personnel, confidentials, the sports, clubs, everything. And well, actually, she sent me like a gazillion spreadsheets with all these different things in them. And I aggregated them all into one worksheet and then began summing the data. And, you know, it's rather staggering what we're facing in terms of that portion of our budget. And what I'll do is I will email this out to the rest of the board so you guys can take a look at it too. And then we can, or committee, you guys can start to give me your thoughts on this. But it's a, I know things change from one thing to the next, but that portion of our budget's jumping 9.3% next year, 11% in 13-14, and 9.7% in 14-15. So it's moving about $7.5 million over the next 3 years, provided all things remain the same. PSERS remains the same, the employees that we have remain the same, you know, those types of things. Everybody that was hired as that she sent this to me, I get it, people move, people retire, things change, and we negotiate things differently, and that can change. It's a significant amount of money, and we just need to be prepared for that as we go forward.
How does BCTC's, how do their teachers, I know we voted on that we voted to pass their budget, because I was at BCTC last night, and we had a vote in raises for their staff, and I was just wondering, because when I asked the question, you know, about do we have to, I mean, why is this raise there for 65 people to get 50 cents, and then other people getting $750, they all told me it was contractual. Is that, so I was looking at it for next year, that means our money going toward them should go up next year. Is there any way that we can control any of BCTC's expenses that will affect us?
I don't think we have there's an agreement in place with BCTC as to how the costs for BCTC are computed, and they use a formula, and then they generate what our costs are, and that's what we're obligated to pay.
But even if they get increased there, it doesn't mean our budget goes up. They could cut some other thing.
Well, when we agreed upon the budget,
Yeah.
I forget what month it was many months.
March.
March.
It was March when we were out there.
Right.
That was
They
the
had
night we were
already
out there.
built
That's
in
when
all
you,
these
I think it was the
raises
night
at
you,
the time of the
I think it was the night you
budget.
called in, Andrew.
But you can vote no.
I mean, as a board,
We can vote no.
I just wondered if we can tell them in advance that we won't.
but so here's the thing, it's
Contractual.
That's
you know,
what they
it's
told
a
me.
consensus. It's like anything else. So we as a board, Daniel Boone can say, well, no, we don't approve your budget.
But
right?
they only
And
need,
then-
what,
but
2/3
we're
or
one of something like 18 schools or 20-something
16, I
schools.
think.
16.
Yeah, that participate in BCTC. So if you need 9 other schools or 8 other schools other than Dana Boone to say, no, we're not approving your budget either, and then they'd have to go back and redo their budget.
But they wouldn't necessarily not give those raises. They'd have to cut.
They'd have to find some other else
way to
to-
cut other staff or something. They're contractual. They can't not honor them. It's like, oh, we have to honor ours. They just have to cut whatever, paper, toilet paper, anything, if we all vote no on those budgets.
Mhm.
That-
Well, there were other schools that weren't so happy either.
Yeah,
because
but that
it was
wasn't,
the last-
those increases. That was,
I think it had to do with the allocations of their costs.
it had to do with that, yeah.
No, it had to do with the fact that they laid off a number of people and
That's
their
what it was.
costs went up.
Yeah, that's what it was. The biggest thing was that.
Remember that, it was
their
that,
costs went-
that whole thing with,
Their costs went up, but they laid off like math teachers.
that whole thing with the.
Math teachers.
Yeah.
Right, there were 7 math teachers, and they said that's where they got their savings, but then.
Then their
last
budget
year,
went up
budget went
anyway.
up.
The budget went up,
Yeah,
so.
because they didn't cut any other expenses.
But I was talking to Mike last night, and I said, I didn't expect this whole sheet of 5 sheets of all these raises last night, and then we were voting on them, and I said, well, have you already?
Because
they
it's
just-
contractual.
Right. So I just wondered, how can you stop that up front,
Can't
rather
Well,
than letting
when
it?
their contract
Contracts
comes
come
up
up,
for
then we-
negotiations,
Vote no on, vote no.
by fiat, when we voted our budget in, we voted in all the contractual increases for our employees too.
Oh, now that when their contract comes up, if you're the representative, then you negotiate and you have to vote on that, but that final contract, vote no, if that's what it ends up being. So whoever our rep was before, who was it?
I was on there.
Yeah, who? Yeah,
Tamara Twardowski. was
yeah,
on
so
there.
I don't know,
Michael
I don't
Shearer was
remember,
on there.
I don't remember how old their contract is.
Yeah, I don't know.
Their contract might go back 3 years, 4 years. So
Yeah, that I-
whoever
that I
our
don't
rep
know.
was, either voted yes or no, I don't remember, but they had enough yeses to accept that, so now you have to accept those contracts.
Because I know some of the people were uneasy with it, some of the
Well,
other.
because they're all new, because again, it's probably the same thing here, when they voted on those contracts, things were economically better, so then you voted, those contracts were voted yes, favorably. Now, we're all stuck in those contracts. So is BCTC. So is the IU.
And their percentage of raises was higher than what we were giving, so I was just wondering how that,
Again, when they
Played in,
negotiated,
how
They
that's
obviously
gonna-
when they negotiated, they got their
a
increase.
contract that was aggressive on the behalf of the employees, and
Sure.
as a result of that, you guys are now stuck, or we are all stuck.
Correct.
But you as a representative on the board, or Mike as a representative on the board, is stuck having to approve a decision that was made a couple of years ago.
And basically,
Until that contract comes up for
Correct.
negotiation again, you guys
Yeah,
okay. Well, I was just thinking how that would affect us, because they
it
were.
does.
it does affect us.
It affects all of us.
It did, but, because some of the other schools were looking at, wanting to bail out on the BCIU bidding last night. And they weren't happy with that bid because of how it affects, so some of them were thinking about pulling out, but then, how would that that rippling effect affect us? Like, then all of our bills would go up, wouldn't they, if the bids didn't?
Well, yeah, but you could say that about the consortium that was just formed about the health insurance. Why did they vote to keep the same thing? Point of going self-insured is to do it, but the 18 school districts, which were one of them, voted yes.
And you can always opt
You can-
out.
yeah, I mean,
we had an option to opt out of the consortium
Correct.
as well, and for a long time, we debated whether or not we were gonna move in or move out. It came down to dollars and cents. Could we go out and get health insurance costs cheaper on our
Correct.
own versus being in a consortium with 17 other school districts and buying at a bulk rate?
Correct.
It was a lot cheaper. I forget what the number was. It's like $30,000 or $40,000 cheaper a year.
Oh, it was more than that, wasn't it?
Maybe up front.
Actually,
The first time
Wilson,
it was
Wilson
like
jumped in.
$100,000.
Wilson jumped in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wilson jumped in.
Yeah,
But again, it was just formed and it was just signed this year, that next year it's self-insured. But again, that's when they presented to the 18 representatives, they all voted yes. They shouldn't have done it. They said they need seed money. I think that's a little high for seed money, but
Well, I was just looking
fact, I
at,
think
like,
that's a lot
in
for seed
future,
money.
maybe we should, there might be a way to save some money is to make sure that, how that's gonna affect us. We need to look at, changing these things. How-
speaking of that, did we ever get that money back?
I don't think so.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. the seed money you're talking
No, I'm talking about the money that the capitals, remember all the consortium paid in and we overpaid and they were gonna refund about, what, $2 million, gonna be broken up evenly between all the schools?
for the insurance consortium?
Mm-hmm. Prior to going self-insured. There was something going on about that.
Well, I know with BCTC, we had to get some money back.
Well,
And
I
we did
thought-
get- we
I
did get
thought
that
the
money back.
consortium-
I
I
don't
thought
know
the
about the
consortium.
consortium.
I thought there was an overpayment of that.
Yeah, I didn't hear
too.
anything about that.
Because that's one of the reasons why everybody started going and looking at self-insuring. Then they kept capital as the third-party administrator. I think the health insurance we should have done better this year, but.
All right, so Dr. Otto, you guys are gonna look at bids for modeling,
RFPs or bids, however we have to do it, sure. Absolutely.
and you'll sit down with Danielle, or you want me to sit down with Danielle and ask her to start carving out an annual budget?
I'll tell her to listen to the tape.
Frank, were you gonna try to do something with that data?
Yep.
All right, so I guess the three of us will round, touch base with Danielle and ask her to.
So much for your January being,
Mm-hmm.
so much for your July being off.
Yeah. Shouldn't take that long to get the data we want.
Didn't you try to resign
Frank
from
was taking
treasurer?
hiatus in July.
Didn't you try to resign from that position? Everybody just gave it
I
back?
just gave everybody the.
You weren't at that meeting, if I recall.
Oh, he was there.
No, he wasn't.
No, I
Not
wasn't.
This year, he
I was
was
on an
not.
airplane, I was getting.
This year, he was not on the. I heard you.
I tried to
I heard
dial
you
in.
object, but it was too late.
Okay, does anybody have any questions or anything that we covered? I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Yeah, we'll do public comment. So if nobody has any questions.
Nope, go ahead. You don't have to stand at the podium, we can hear you. Yeah, okay.
He's been sitting long enough.
Connor Person on Ridge Drive up. So, I sent out an email last night about zero-based budgeting, and I received a response at some point
Who did you
from.
send it to?
I sent it to
Everybody.
the Finance Committee.
Yep,
Oh, you did?
I got
Yep,
it.
you didn't read it,
I'm
Andrew.
sorry, I didn't see it, Connor. So what was your email?
I sent a link to a story that was published on a website called the Holmes Education Post.
Do you want to forward to you, Andrew?
How
Yeah, would you
one Texas school district employed zero-based budgeting and seemed to have some pretty positive results in that district. And I was just wondering, I'm still, I don't want to say mystified, but a bit perplexed at why we budget the way we do and how our buildings get their supplies. I received a spreadsheet there from Mrs. Penza saying that roughly, actually 89.98% of our expenditures are contractual, and we don't have
Oh, I don't have a
control
signal here.
year to year. And I'm wondering, the other 10%, how are those costs determined every year?
Well, if you think about it, our, salaries and benefits are contractual, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
so
the
those,
spreadsheet that Danielle drew up today.
I
in
mean, there's a
response to
certain
that.
percentage like Act 93 and some of these others that,
Danielle and I talked about this today. I had her, just to give a snapshot to help Connor's question, show how about
Right, so-
95% of our costs are kind of locked in.
but salaries and benefits alone are $35 million, right? So $35 million out of a $50 million budget is like 65%, okay? You got debt service, which is another $7 million, that's around 13-14%. Let's see, we've got, transportation's 2.7 million. Did you get this spreadsheet?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right
Okay,
now.
so that's 2.7 million, like transportation's another 7%. And so you start adding these things up. If you just take those right there, you're at like, 82, 83%, some of that percentage.
90%, everything right.
And then you start adding in all these other things, out-of-district placements, which we don't have a lot of control over. You start talking about charter school tuition, which again...
That's a fixed cost.
That's actually mandated to us by the state. BCTC and IU, I mean, those are things I suppose we could either opt in or opt out of at the end of the day, but they do provide, we do have a requirement, don't we, in the state code?
Mhm.
To provide
If the kid wants to go there,
Yes.
sure.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so a lot of these things we're locked into these things. So at the end of the day, the other 10% is,
I see 4%, well, 3.6% is disposal, water, sewage, snow removal, extermination, legal fees, all that.
I mean, think about it. Look at our energy. Energy alone is $1 million. Okay, so just the heat and cool the buildings cost us $1 million a
Which we
year.
get refunds for, which we've been getting rebates on.
We do get some, right, with the programs that Kenny
Well, we
did.
had some demand response
Right.
money that comes back, it's
Sure.
like $30,000 or $40,000, but we agreed a year, but we agreed that money would be going to
Capital
fund our
reserve.
capital reserves, because we're not setting any money aside right now for our capital reserves at all as part of our operating budget. Quite frankly, we should, but we don't have the money to do that, so we're
Sorry,
gonna
did you get that email?
Yeah, I have it. Thanks.
start coming together with a couple other things. Legal fees, that's a retain. Snow removal, that's a plug number, and it'll either be high or low depending on what kind of season we have. Water, sewer, and waste.
We kind of labeled those as overhead costs.
Yeah, you consider those can, but I mean, at the end of the day, you gotta pay them one way or the other. You can't operate these facilities without paying those costs.
So really 96%, or actually I guess it's more, but 94% of our budget is already set, going in year after year after
Correct.
year.
Somewhere,
See, that's the biggest frustration.
there's not much variation around that figure. The only kind of money that you have is anything that I like to say that's above the 300 codes in the budget process, the 4, 5, 6, 7, 800s, where it's where your supplies are, especially like 600 codes, where your supplies are, your building supplies, your technology is one of those where you really have a lot of room to say, you know what, we're going to zero-based budget from there. If you want technology, you have to, but we even have some embedded costs there for software programs that you have to have and things like that. So it's
The biggest frustration is most people don't understand that.
Yeah, looking at the
I mean, that's
spreadsheet,
the
it was
biggest
very
thing, that's what I'm
helpful.
saying. Year to year, you can't change much. Now, yes, you can, once you get contracts come up, once you get, certain things come up, that kind of stuff. But year to year, for the most part, we control very little percentage of.
that spreadsheet really should drive home to anybody that looks at it
Correct.
the need to carefully negotiate.
It will get, then again.
Because when you're negotiating, 65% of your cost is embedded in that one act that
Correct.
you have with that
Correct.
one group of
Correct.
employees.
But once it's signed, year to year, you really don't have that much room to play with the budget.
Now, just for my own
I shouldn't say
edification, I
play.
guess, the 5% that is not listed on here, that is not overhead or contractual, that would be your supplies.
Technology, supplies,
Incidentals.
incidentals, anything that, again, that's in the, I don't know if Danielle put special ed placements on there or not. That would vary. Connor, sometimes we take regular ed students who have, instead of expelling them, we'll put them in Manitou. That's not necessarily reflected on there.
I mean, at the end of the day, 5% of a $50 million budget is only $2.5 million.
I know, yeah.
So if you start talking about supplies and stuff like that, I think we spend, I got it right here on one of the spreadsheets, we spend supplies, we spend $1.7 million in supplies in a year.
All right.
This year I think we're spending 1.4 or something like that. Maybe.
And I think the part,
That's half of it.
So we're really only fighting over that one.
so
only fighting over this
when you
pie
look at
here.
where we have been able to, quote, have these surpluses is in that little area that we freeze.
Well,
Correct.
not only that though, we in the last 2 years, we have taken a dive into salaries and benefits. Okay, so
Correct.
we did do an early retirement package, a year ago, which got rid of the senior level folks that were making $100,000 a year or whatnot, and we were able to incentivize them to leave, so we hired people that were making $40,000 a year, right? That helps.
Teacher.
Control.
The concessions a couple of years ago.
We cut kindergarten. You got rid of, 7 people?
Correct.
That's $700,000 a year that went off the top end of the budget. We took out AIDS, which was $1 million a year.
That you can do.
In salaries. So
Teachers freezing, administration freezing.
those types of things. So we have done
Classified.
work in the salaries and benefits. It's not like it's not touchable.
Right.
And quite frankly, we talked about this issue of curriculum, right? What are we offering in terms of classes and electives and those sort of things? Well, if you decide you're not going to offer a class anymore, and that means that teacher is going to go away, well, then you just took another, $70,000, $80,000 off your budget. And if you do that in multiple places, you can shrink the size of that portion of your budget.
And another
Now,
place
what-
where we saved that I would add in there we have taken a pretty, Mr. Smith's department has taken it on the chin a little bit, frankly, and as some people have left, we just haven't replaced them, and as a way of saving as well. So if you look at his workforce from when I got here in 2008 to now, that number's, it's got to be down. There are a number of people we just haven't.
By half.
Yeah, we haven't. Scott, do you know offhand what?
We've lost like 4 or 5 custodians
Yeah.
in the last 2 years.
Here's two things I would like you to, one is charter schools. That's just, that charter schools are, that's
That's a killer.
800,000. And here, and Scott's like, I like this, transportation, $2.7 million. And that's not, that has nothing to do with classes though. Those are the costs that, and again, I'm not advocating getting rid of the buses, obviously, but again, that has nothing to do with classrooms.
Yeah.
That's almost $3 million. And the other thing is charter schools. Charter schools are killing us.
Well, and
Right?
in fairness to the state, the governor and the legislature, well, not so much the governor, I think the legislature has recognized that there's some uneven, I'll be politically correct, accounting for how some of that money is
The charter
being
school.
spent for charter, and
Correct.
especially the cyber charter schools.
Correct. That's really bad.
Well, now they just talked about it.
Right.
They did. That's
Pull
what I said.
out athletics.
If they
pull
fix
out-
that, we
Correct.
may
In the
see a
cost.
reduction in that number eventually.
Correct. They should pull that out.
We spoke at one meeting, every committee meeting was, about potentially looking into stirring up our own.
That was us at Revenue Enhancement.
Okay, whatever happened with that?
Well, I'm waiting. I mean, I
Now
think
you wanna wait.
one of the things that Frank said was if they de-incentivize us, if that's a word,
Then why do it?
if they don't, in other words, if they level the playing field, it won't be in our best interest then to start our own program. So I'm kind of waiting to see where the legislation goes. They could potentially,
Cut it.
for the cyber charters, they could halve the amount that we're now sending out per kid. So if that happens,
For everything.
I mean, we spend what, $12,000 per kid?
No, it's not quite that high.
10,400 or
Something like that.
that.
That's
So we
close.
spend
Yeah.
So they-
$10,400
that's what they
per
charge
kid.
us.
So what happens is the kid goes to charter school, we gotta take $10,400 and give it.
But
to
that
the
includes
charter
everything, sports, activities.
and the way that
school. Our
And they don't
overhead.
spend
And that's-
all that.
and
the way
here's
that
what's
the way that happens is when you say, we talked earlier in this committee meeting tonight about the $8 million or so that we get from the state. It comes out of that $8 million. There's no new money, and that's been one of the criticisms of the charter school. What they're doing with charter schools, the state, instead of, because they passed this legislation from the Harrisburg level, and then it trickles down to the local school districts, and it's the local school district's money. Like if you live in Daniel Boone and you want to go to a cyber charter in Pittsburgh, well, it's virtual. That money just goes
There's no
right out to
overhead.
Pittsburgh.
There's no overhead. They don't have classrooms, they don't have buildings, they don't have.
So what they're trying to do
That's
is
enormous.
to
Clubs.
Clubs.
what they're trying to do is have cyber charters, especially the cyber charters, more accurately represent their costs,
Correct.
so that we're not paying for things that really aren't happening.
Yeah, they're not paying for buildings.
Okay, thank you for that, answering my question and forwarding me this spreadsheet. I think it would be very helpful to the other members of the board too, particularly the new ones who may not quite understand and may not be able to see those figures. I found it very helpful.
Good.
And actually, that percentage has not changed a lot.
Okay.
I mean, for years, since I've been on the board, it's roughly 89, 92, depending on whatever year, but it's always been that way for
When I
a
first
long,
got on
long
the
time.
board, though, I was told the same thing, well, you can't touch 90%. And then within the following 2 years, we touched the 90%. We negotiated a contract, we incurred more debt, we did all these other things that quite frankly impact this. So there's always an opportunity as a board member, I think, to be able to have your hand in this. And if we don't sign multi-year, contracts that are 5 or 6 years long, then every board member has an opportunity to weigh in on the other 90%.
See, and when you look
As
at
a board, we need to be conscious of that when we do negotiate a contract. You don't sign something that's 4 years or 5 years long, because you can literally, somebody can come sit on the board and never see that contract, or have an opportunity to weigh in on it.
And they have to be negotiated at their maturity. That's what we need to do, and that's what we're trying to do. You've been involved to the point where we've been very reactionary to try to balance the budget. But what we're trying to get to is a point where
It's 3 minutes.
we're more planning
It's 3 minutes.
of it. So,
We don't have
for
a 3-minute
example,
rule.
What's that?
His legs are getting tired, though. He's starting to
His 3
lean.
minutes are up. Sit down, Connor.
His legs are getting tired.
I was just going to say, if you have to look at this and you say, okay, we're paying out of a $48 million, somewhere around $48 million revenue stream, we're spending almost $34 million in salary and benefits. Is that reasonable? And that number is going to keep going. So when we renegotiate contracts, like the teachers' contracts, we don't look at it from the date of the contract, we look at it from the termination of it. So if we're negotiating a 4-year contract with the teachers, we need to look at year 4, not year 1.
Correct.
And what's this going to be in year 4, and can we sustain that? Instead of doing it what we're seeing is we can't sustain it. The contract that we're in now with the teachers, as it keeps going from year to year, it's unsustainable. So now, when we do it, when the time comes to do it again, we have to look at the end date of that contract and say, where are we then? That's why we need.
And that's where a 5-year model comes in.
And then we could say, well, this would, in order for us to sustain that, we'd have to raise taxes to this level every year, and that's not acceptable.
The contract that we have entered into now was an early bird contract, correct?
It was.
It was.
Has that been the standard practice, early bird contract?
Depending on what we needed at the time.
Okay,
I don't know.
all right.
No, it's not a standard practice. It's a practice you can use.
Some people might disagree, but at certain times it was beneficial to do it. The first time it was done, it was probably beneficial. Again, we thought at the time based on the economic times. Last time we did one was because we were negotiating with them to help us out. So again, it was redone, how many years ago, everybody? 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
So again, it depends on the time. Now, who knows?
Okay. And that is a joint decision, I'm sure, to...
Well, they don't have to even meet with us. You can ask them, we want to do an early bird, and they don't have to meet with you. I mean, I'm sure they would sit down and talk about it.
You can renegotiate.
You can renegotiate anything, but...
You can always ask.
You can always sit down and ask to it, and
You can always
have a
ask.
couple meetings, but that doesn't mean they have to do it.
We're sitting in a cap.
Same way they can come to us and say, we want you to redo it for whatever reason, we don't have to accept it. But I'm sure we'd sit across the table and, see what they have to say.
All right, we'll all sit down now. Thank you.
Wow, abuse your 3 minutes or something.
I'm kind of curious, since it is so important that the contracts are negotiated properly and everything, and when they all come due at different times, is there any reason why we haven't put together, and I know the board negotiates these contracts, is there any way we can find professional people that can negotiate these contracts for us, rather than try and
Lots of
have,
school districts have their solicitors.
well, is there a reason why we don't? Like, because
think
they
the
all...
Yeah, but we
argument-
did. There was no opportunity for the classified one.
Yeah, when we negotiated the teacher's contract, the argument was we have a great relationship with them, and we don't want to sour the relationship by bringing in a third party.
But you got to agree on the third party too.
But, no, you don't have to agree on it.
That's only if you go to arbitration.
But no, you have to agree on the person to do it. Well, yeah, we can hire a mediator. We can hire.
Yeah, they're very well
solicitor,
trained
you can hire
at
anybody,
You
negotiating.
can hire a solicitor, you can hire a professional negotiator, you can hire whoever you want.
Wondering
Sure.
how much that would cost, like if we talked to
Depends on what
Brian
drags out.
or Mr. Subers about, their
Well,
firm taking our contracts
Fox
and putting
Rothschild
them...
does negotiate contracts, and
Sure.
we can certainly ask for their assistance. I know people who have offered to do it for free or professional negotiators, and we can
Well, we
bring
should-
them their assistance to help us.
But you don't need it for 3 years.
Well, they might step in, like if they know when the contracts are coming due, they have a chance to review them, they can do all the...
They'll do that.
They can do that.
Yeah,
Mark,
In an
They just have to
hour.
read the contract. They have to sit for an hour and read the contract.
Yeah,
Well,
read
then I don't
contract
see
in an
why
hour
we
and say
don't
what things
use
don't
them.
you guys like.
What don't you like, and then we'll go from there. You don't need to hire somebody.
We just take,
You don't need to talk to anybody now.
Look, there's going to be time for us. Next year, we'll try to sit down with the teachers again and say, look, we need to renegotiate the contract, and they can say yes or no. If they say yes, then it's a question of, okay, well, look, here are the things we need to change. I've got a list in my head of
Correct.
things that we need to change in that contract.
Mhm.
And
And
quite
I'm sure
frankly,
they-
I'm not sure why we do what we do in there, but.
I'm sure they have a list too.
But instead of you going to negotiate that, would it be better to have a professional negotiator
Again, it
go in and
depends.
do that?
I think it's always helpful to have somebody sitting in the room who does it for a living, to, at the very least, observe what's happening and provide you with feedback.
if they're not gonna actively participate, if, the group says, no, we don't want that person actively participate, I think, in my opinion, you'd want them at least sitting in the room with you, on your side of the table, to watch what's going on, listen to what's being said, and then pull you aside and give you some advice during those negotiations. If they're skilled enough and you trust them enough to negotiate on your behalf, then, you can certainly have them do that too, but that's.
And remember now, and again, I'm playing his devil's advocate, they'll do the same thing, so then it could make it worse.
But
Again,
I
I'm just
still
saying
think
to you.
I still think having someone who does this for a
Well,
living,
of course,
day
that's
in
what they're
and
gonna
day
do
out,
then
would
too.
actually have a better.
But then so are they. They're certainly not gonna
Well,
come in
then at
without.
least they're head to
They
head.
do it anyways, though. They got their.
Sure they
They do behind the
Well,
scenes. Sure, they do.
They
behind
get
the
that
scenes.
service as part of the
But
union,
so, yeah,
the union
They
dues
have
that
their
are
union
paid.
sitting behind the scenes.
Correct.
And the union's sitting there pulling all the other teachers' contracts together across the state and across other states.
So they know
And they're
that.
saying, you need to get this and you need to get that. I mean, they're getting that advice constantly.
Correct.
We haven't gotten any advice
I
in
think
the
we
4 years
should
we've been here.
start bringing in someone,
I agree with
taking
you.
someone in when we go to do
I think it's
anything
way
and
too early
have
now,
that
though.
person in there. I mean, if there's someone that would do it for free, that's
I think it's way
great,
too early
but if,
now.
Well, it's not too early if they agree to renegotiate.
yeah, if they.
Yeah, I mean-
Well, no,
if
wait,
they
that's
wanna-
different. If they're gonna, that you got to cross that bridge first.
Well, I think anytime anyone says we'll renegotiate, we should have that
Well,
person.
that's different,
come in.
David.
Or even if you want to pursue, go for
Sure.
it.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
just,
Oh, let's give them.
I don't think you're getting
Let's give the
into any
gentleman
disagreement.
3 minutes. Go.
oh,
Mr. Martino.
I'm on Connor style, what do you mean 3 minutes?
He's on the board.
That's a nice
There's no time limit in the committee. Go ahead.
No, that's all right, I'm not gonna take long. It's just, I wasn't gonna say anything, but Connor opened the door, so I think, why
Way to go,
not?
Connor.
Sorry. No, as co-chair of the taxpayers group, a couple comments on what you said tonight. I don't know if you remember, but a couple of months ago in this room, I asked about your budget, how you manage your budget, because saying what percentage was spent is not managing the budget. So I'm glad to hear you're looking at actually proposing what you'll spend monthly and then seeing how well you manage to do that.
I have to say, that's been something we've expressed here at least 12 months ago.
No, I'm not
Yeah.
saying it's me, I mean.
No, I'm just saying.
It's not a
like,
novel idea.
it's not a novel idea here either. We've been trying to get this done for a couple of years now, so I'm hopeful this is the year.
And your 5-year budget, and it's a nice concept. I think the problem you're gonna have with it is you have no idea what the state's gonna do every year.
But
Right.
I'm not worried about the revenue side.
It's the contractual side
Well,
we're
that's
interested
it.
in.
I understand that. You can look at what you're gonna have to spend.
Right.
But you
But you're not
won't,
gonna
you'll
know
never know
revenue.
revenue.
Right.
We don't have to know the revenue side. All we need to know is what are our expenses going to be over the next 5 years? And if you change something here and you tickle this root, how far does a branch swing? You know what I'm saying? And that's the type of analysis we need to be able to do as a board. So when you are negotiating a contract and say, well, we'll give you this, and you put that into the model, well, that's what you get at the other end, which is what Frank's talking about, right? And then you can sit there and say, okay, we're here, and we got to go there. And if you assume level funding from the state going forward, you can make that assumption. Maybe it's not a valid one, but you got to make some assumption. Then you can say, okay, well, here's the gap. Here's how the gap grows from one year to the next. How are we, as a local school, going to fund the gap?
Right, or even level funding from the taxpayer, even better yet. So now we know,
We'll buy into that.
right, now we know, I'll buy into that too. Now we know what it is that we would need from the state. And, is that not gonna come every year, or are we gonna have a problem there? So if we may not have everything, but if we could fill in as many variables as we can, we could at least say, well, gosh, we got a real dependency here to get this much money from the state. Or else taxes go up, or something gets cut, or something has to happen.
Well, a model's only effective as the assumptions
It just
upon which
helps
you
it get
base it.
closer.
See, I think we should be able to have to pass our budget after the state passes theirs.
Yeah,
I think that's the we're still blind. It's
It
the
doesn't make
29th of
sense.
the month, and we're blind. We have no idea yet. We're going to get. They could completely screw us tomorrow or by the end of the month and give us half of what we anticipate.
Two other quick things. You mentioned 35 million, I heard 34 million in salaries and benefits, which no matter how you cut it, is 70% of your budget. And I realize it's contractual, but you've talked at your meetings about the curriculum and all the electives, and I think you really need to take a long, hard look at the curricula and the electives and your programs to see what you can afford.
That's a different committee.
I mean, no,
I understand, but
Well,
you're
not
all
necessarily.
part of that.
Well, no, but I mean, they are gonna look at that.
I've got
That's
6
Walt's
members of the
doing.
committee here tonight, so.
But no, Walt's starting to do that.
No,
That's
but I'm
the
saying
way.
though, finance has a
Sure.
direct bearing on curriculum, so if you
Sure,
can't
but I
afford the
also-
curriculum, you gotta,
Sure, but I think they should also, I think Walt really wants to look at high school.
No,
at
I
least
know,
high
but
school.
that's
Well, the
fine.
number, you know, what you bring up is an issue that sort of leads into an issue that I've always tried to raise, but it sounds simple, but it's so difficult because we still can't do it. And my question for 3 years now has been, can you tell me what it costs us as a school district to provide what the state mandates we have to provide for these kids? How much does that cost? If we did just what we were mandated to do, that curriculum, how many buildings would we need to do that? How much money would it cost us to do that? And now let's start adding on all the other extra things. And then we could say what we want to add and what we don't want to add, but we can't even get that number. We can't get that number to say, what is the
Maybe not a number,
the
but
minimum?
But you know what you're mandated to provide. And then you need to look at what you provide in addition to that.
I've never got that answer straight either. I mean, we've talked about what is it that we're mandated to provide, right? And then
We have.
that gets real fuzzy as we keep talking through it.
But I think this
That gets
committee and
fuzzy on
curriculum
what
have to
it
work
is.
together. I think the curriculum committee, that's one of the things that Walt.
well, I
wants
think
to
what the
do.
curriculum committee needs to do is they need to answer that question.
Sure,
What
absolutely.
does the state mandate we provide? And here's those classes. Now let's take our teachers, put them into that thing, okay, here are the teachers that teach us classes. There's your budget.
Right.
Now you know what you have to provide.
Curriculum needs to do that and send it to us. And then,
Correct.
as a finance committee, we can say, well, here's what it costs to do that.
Correct,
Now we've got that number.
correct.
One last thing, and this is directly toward what Monica was asking about. I spent 30-some years in management, negotiating contracts from a management side. And recently I've been negotiating a contract from the Teamster side of the table. So I've seen both sides. Having a professional negotiator, well, that's great if they can speak. If they're just advising you, you already go into negotiations, I would hope, knowing what you could afford to spend and having a bottom line number that we can't go beyond this. The thing the board's going to have to decide, in my opinion, the board and the administration, is how far are you willing to go with drawing that line? If you draw a line and say, we can afford 37 million tops as salary and benefits, well, they're willing to strike. Are you willing to accept the strike?
Not only us, the taxpayers and the parents. of the
Well, I
students.
understand that.
That's a big one.
I understand that,
Look
but
at
at
the
some
Chamonix School
point,
District.
you're going to have to be willing to take the heat if that
Well,
happens.
look at-
Remember something, if the teachers strike, unless it's this ad infinitum strike.
They can't.
You can't do that anymore.
Exactly. So they're going to get their salary made up anyway because you're going to have 180 days of school mandated by the state.
Correct. Look
They're
at-
not going to lose a thing by
Look at,
striking.
look at Neshaminy,
Right.
4 years.
But they're not going to lose a thing by striking because they're still going to get their 180 days worth of pay. You've got to decide what are you willing to do.
Here's what I hope. I hope Neshaminy figures it out before we come up. They've been holding out 4 years. Those
That's
tax,
3 more years.
but those taxpayers are definitely for the board. That board has not given one thing back.
O.J. Roberts,
Yeah, but
teachers-
Neshaminy's the longest one. They had
No, O.J. Roberts, they went 7 years without a contract there.
Yeah, but they weren't striking.
They struck the last 2
Neshaminy
years.
struck the last day of school and made the kids come back 10 days later.
All I'm saying is you're going to need to figure out what your
Sure.
bottom line is, and you're going to need to figure out how firm you feel you can afford to be with that.
Correct.
I agree with you.
Because
Correct.
they're actually in the driver's seat.
But that's where I think the taxpayers have to back the board, whoever the board is.
Well, you may have to do some selling to the taxpayers.
Exactly, sure. But that's exactly what that board did. That's what
But thank you for your time.
Any other
that was
comments?
more than 3 minutes.
Okay, thanks everybody.
A wrap?
Everybody.
Meeting adjourned.